Guys, welcome to another edition of JDV On Air. It's an absolute privilege this morning to interview Graham Duxbury, who's a legend in his own right, famous racing driver, motorsport commentary, and of course business owner of Duxbury Networking. Graham, so welcome to the podcast. I want to get right into it in terms of the starting grid of your racing career. I mean, if we had to go back to 1984, it was a massive year for you. You won the Daytona 24 hours, which of course was an incredible international victory for South Africa as well. And then in the same year, you also started Duxbury Networking, which feels more than a pure coincidence. I mean, did that win on the track give you the confidence and the vision you needed to launch your company, or what's the story behind that?
Okay, so we, in fact, Barry and I, started the company in 1981, not 1984, but not this company. We had a different one. We had solar panels that we were trying to sell, which of course nobody was interested in. We had fireproof plastic that no one was interested in. And I think after 3 years of business, we'd made a total of 12,000 Rand profit, and that was about it. And then we came across modems and discovered that this was something that was needed. And we started importing modems from the US and then started manufacturing them in South Africa. So actually, the fact that the two things happened in the same year was more of a coincidence than anything else. But I think what is interesting for me is that Barry, who was my partner, 15 years older than me when he was, before he passed away, obviously, he came from the industry and I didn't. And I got back from racing overseas and I had no money, and he was obviously fairly wealthy, and said he wanted to be a partner. But he said to me, I don't do money, I don't do responsibility, and I don't do sales, but I will give you the best product in the world to sell. And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, Barry was my mentor, and pretty much everything that I have today is because of Barry Nieuwenborn.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I mean, your Daytona win was a true all South African victory, which must have been an amazing feeling. Today, your business is all about empowering South African reseller channel partners. Is there a link there? That experience of winning with a local team, did it shape your belief in terms of backing local talent at all?
Absolutely. You know, I think, first of all, motor racing and business are very similar. Now, I know you've got your book, which people hopefully have read, and you can see the whole question of how you put sport and adventure together with the boardroom. And ultimately, our industry in the IT is exactly the same as motor racing. Whatever I'm selling you today, I've got something in the background that's being made that's faster, smaller, probably cheaper. Whatever racing car I ever drove over my career, there was always somebody in the background developing something that was going to be faster or better, and so on. And I think that is, it gives you that idea that you've got to be innovative all the time. You know, in our business and in motor racing, you can't sit still. You just look at Formula One and you see what happens. McLaren 2 years ago were nowhere, and today they're dominant because they never sat back. And other people are catching up all the time or trying to catch up. So to me, that's the comparison. And in terms of South Africa, well, you know, I mean, this is my country. What can I say? It's as simple as that. I'm not going anywhere and never planned to go anywhere in the first place. So I think it was the best decision that I ever made.
Stunning. Last night I read an interview you did some time ago where you praised a race team for spending money smartly. I think the quote you used was good organization and solid engineering instead of sheer opulence. Has that been the secret sauce at Duxbury Networking, a lean, performance-first approach to running the business for the last 40 years?
You know, I don't want to owe money, and one must be conservative, because you know, you're not always going to have great years or great quarters. And if you spent the money that you made in the year one on whatever it might be, stuff you didn't need, let's call it opulence, well, where's the money to keep the business going through a lean time for whatever reason? It might be that a reseller doesn't pay you when they're supposed to pay you, but you must still pay the vendor. Now, if you've got money and you've got no debt, well, it's much easier to sleep at night and a lot easier to keep the vendors happy and everybody else happy to keep the business going. So for me, being conservative. Well, you could turn around and say, well, if you're not going to aim for the stars, you're not going to get there. And maybe we could have been twice the size. But believe me, I'm very comfortable with how the company is. And I think that everybody who works here gets remunerated correctly. And therefore, that allows us to do this because we don't have this huge debt profile that other people do. I mean, when you're 25, you all want a Porsche Turbo. And you had a great month or a great couple of months, you think you can go and buy one. But then the next year, you end up losing the whole lot. So conservativeness for me is very important in terms of how we run the operation here.
So that 84 Daytona win, you guys started what, back in 44th position? Where did you guys start?
No. Basically, what happened there was we'd bought the car from the champion from the year before, Al Holbert. And he won the last race at Daytona in November. There was a short race, 3-hour race. And we bought the car, and so the car was pretty set up. But it was a March, Robin Hurd, and the car was designed by Adrian Newey. Now, anybody who knows Formula One today knows exactly who Adrian Newey is with Red Bull and for next year, now with Aston Martin. And all they wanted to do was to put the car on pole because the two Andrettis, Michael and Mario, had the first 962 Porsche. It was entered by Porsche, pure white, had nothing on it except Porsche. Anyway, in qualifying, we didn't get pole. We were second. So we started second. And there's a video of the first 5 laps of Sarl and Mario Andretti passing each other as if this was a 10-lap sprint. Anyway, really exciting. And then from there, we just had the reliability. The Porsche stopped and various other people stopped. And, you ask, what do I remember from that? One of the fascinating things is you go to the US, nobody knew who we were. And I was behind AJ Foyt. And again, anybody who knows American motor racing knows AJ Foyt is an absolute superstar from the past. And I was behind him going into the banking, and I'm thinking, this is AJ Foyt. And the first thought is, I can't pass him. And then I realized he's slower than me. And I could pass him. I'll never forget making that pass. Was suddenly realizing that, yes, we had the car, we had the ability to actually pass him and go into the lead, and we then won the race. And, there's that story that when we went to the prize giving, or not the prize giving, with all the journalists, we had to introduce ourselves. They didn't know who Tony was or who Sarah was, who Graham was. We had to introduce ourselves, and of course it was Sarel van der Meer for Sarl. My name was easy, and Tony Martin's name was obviously easy. But yeah, we had to introduce
ourselves. For the
ourselves.
listeners, of course, we're talking about the legendary Sarl van der Merwe.
Yeah, exactly,
So, I mean, an endurance race is obviously the ultimate test of managing resources. I mean, you guys got the car itself, you've got fuel, you've got the tires. I mean, what would you say is the business equivalence of that in terms of managing resources? Do you use the same kind of discipline on your company that you do in terms of racing?
You have to, but you've got to be flexible. For instance, in the race, we ran out of fuel at some point in time, and immediately, Tony ran back to the pits, got a little bit of fuel to get back in again. So at that point, we could have said, "Oh, well, it's all over." Instead of which, you carry on, you fight through those things, and I think sometimes those bad things that happen or difficult things are the most exciting of the lot. And those are the ones that you remember. It's not the laps that we did where there were no problems. Just as you don't remember the quarters or the months that were super successful, you rather remember that time when it wasn't great and it was a challenge. And to me, when my back's against the wall, that's when I'm at my best. When everything's going well, you become a bit lazy and content, but when your back's against the wall, that's when every one of your senses is heightened because now you need to get out of what it is. So yeah, exactly right. It's that drives a business. It's now 41 years old, this particular business. And there's been some good times, but there have also been some bad times, as is normal. Things change.
So I mean, racing, there's a very fine line in terms of pushing the car to its absolute limits and total disaster. I mean, do you walk the same kind of tightrope in your boardroom? I mean, when you take a calculated risk on a new technology versus playing it safe?
I take a risk, to be honest with you. You got to be sensible. You're not going to go and decide to sell dirty teacups or
calculated
something. Okay?
Risk.
But yeah, I love it. I love the challenge of a new product or a new technology, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. You never really know, and sometimes we also bring product to the market that is ahead of its time, which is difficult because as a distributor, to get the resellers, people such as yourselves, to buy into something brand new when the world hasn't really taken it on because it's brand new in the US. And also, of course, the other mistake you can make is that when the US, a lot of the product comes from the US, they talk about enterprise. And we don't really have many enterprise companies in South Africa. What they talk about enterprise is different to us. So our market is very different. And while your vendor tries to dictate to you what to do, very few of them understand the South African market because we are different. Whether we like it, our culture is different, the way we do business is different. And so you constantly got to look and say, yes, you can look and see what people are doing, maybe in Europe or maybe in Dubai or the US, but you have to adapt it to South African conditions because at the end of the day, we are South Africans, simple and happily.
So I've had the privilege of dealing with you in Duxbury for close on 30 years now. And I mean, the one thing I can say about your company is that you guys are not a traditional box dropper like most of the distributors. You guys have got more technical staff than salespeople. And I mean, that sounds a bit like a racing team where you've got more engineers and mechanics than race drivers. I mean, was that intentional? Did you just model your company on a racing team composition?
No. Very simply, we started off manufacturing. Well, we imported some American modems and soon started to manufacture. So for the first 10 years of our lives, we were modem manufacturers. So technical is in our DNA. Our DNA is full of technical. And I've always said, I'll employ a good technical person in a heartbeat. A salesperson is a different story because they can give me a story and you never know what you're buying until 6 months or 12 months later. So for me, it's ultimately, also it gives me the independence. Remember, we started in 84, very different country to what it is today. You know, the big companies were not in South Africa. If we wanted something to work here, we had to have the ability of building something or importing something and making it work here because we weren't getting assistance from anybody else. It was only in 94 when people started to come to South Africa and realize they could go to Cape Town and go and buy a lobster and a beer for £1.20 or something, you know, or half a dollar, that they all came here. So we had to do it on our own. And ultimately, for me, that became the technical challenge. So no, we're not a box dropper. We're not a huge logistics house. Obviously, we have some of the product that is, you know, run rate that goes out, but we're not one of those typical distributors with a huge logistics operation, maybe, or with robots, etc. That's not who we are. We are more solutions-based specialist networking distributor.
Understood. So just pivoting back to the championships that were engineered by Ken, it showed you how vital a trusted technical partner is. I mean, in your business, you strive to be a business advisor, a trusted advisor to resellers such as ourselves at First Technology. Did working with guys like Ken shape your idea of what a truly great partnership should look like?
I think everything I know in business I learned through motor racing. You know, let's start right at the beginning. You want to go motor racing, you're young, where are you going to get money from? Well, you've got to find a sponsor. And once you've got the sponsor, you've got to make sure the sponsor's happy so that he continues sponsoring you the year after. You are an extension of that person's business. And if you just relate that straight back to business, it's exactly the same story. I've got a product, I come to somebody like you, and I say I want to sell it. Well, I need to make certain that you're being looked after by everybody across the entire board of the company, not just technical. The salespeople have got to be polite and look after you. Our accounts department have got to be good with your accounts department, because if they're not, and they're rude because you didn't pay on the right day or whatever the case might be, you know, it gets back to you and you eventually say, I don't want to deal with Duxbury. You know, they're not a nice company to deal with. So absolutely, the whole basis of how a racing team operates is exactly what is the success. And, you know, it's the small things that make the difference. I remember Ken Howes, who is an absolute legend in terms of South African motor racing and in the US, in the Hendricks Motorsport team, in NASCAR. And I complained, I was racing in Cape Town, and I complained about the first corner, which, if you know, in Cape Town racetrack, it's Holes Hook, and it's a left-hander. And I said, Ken, I can't turn the car, and it's not working, and I want you to change it. He said, yeah, I can change it. But there's another 7 right-handers. So do you want to have 7 corners that you can't do, or do you want one corner where you're going to battle? Thanks, Ken. I'll take the one corner that I'm going to battle with. And I think I won more races in Cape Town than anywhere else because I just loved I loved that racetrack anyway. So it's those tiny little things. And I for those people who possibly don't understand it, think about whatever motor car you drive. All I need to do is to take air out of one tire, just one tire, and your car's worthless until you put the air back in again. It doesn't even cost you any money, but you've now got to take the wheel off, etc. And that is what business is about. It's those small little things that you've got to be looking at all the time that make the difference between just existence and being successful. Attention to detail.
Mm. So that focus that you've got on adding value to resellers such as ourselves here at First Technology, and giving us the support to compete and win ourselves in the channel. I mean, in a way, it sounds less like a team boss and more like a car constructor. That they want to build the machine and lets other people get to victory. Is that how you see your role?
100%. You know, I've turned around. You know, now that we've got a whole bunch of people that work with me. I mean, I look and say I've got very little value in the company anymore. You know, in the past I had to work proper 8 hours a day and was involved in everything. Now that's being done by other people. So it's a real teamwork. And really, I hate labels, but I'm almost becoming a chairman as opposed to a CEO because I've got other people doing all of that work. But I still love doing what I'm doing. That's the important part. So I'm involved in the deals, and I'm excited about the ones we win and disappointed the ones we lose, but so be it. And I think, one of the things is that you got to be fair in life. And I've always looked at tomorrow's more important than today. I know people say you must live for today, but ultimately I don't need to make the big buck today. I'd rather have the relationship and make lots of bucks going forward. And that requires honesty, which is probably one of the most important things I demand in the company from everybody here. Be honest. Because if you're honest, whatever the problem is, if you put your hand up and you forgot to do something, it's easy for me to pick up the phone and phone somebody like you and say, look, we made a mistake. I'm terribly sorry. The minute I admit I've made a mistake, I'm telling you I won't make it again. If I say, oh, it had nothing to do with me, well, then you turn around and you think to yourself, well, this happened now. Why shouldn't it happen again? Because no one's taking responsibility. And I think that there's very few people today, well, there's a lot of people, let's put it the other way around, who don't accept responsibility, always try and blame somebody else for whatever happened. And therefore, how do you move forward if you're going to do that? And if you go back to motor racing, it's exactly, you look at these top team managers, they fully accept all the time where the problem is, and they don't blame. It's not a blame game. It's we've got to work together. Take Yuki Tsunoda with Red Bull at the moment. I mean, clearly Yuki Tsunoda is a great driver, but somewhere that motor car that only Max can get it to do anything, and even he's battling with it now. But they keep on saying, what can we do to change it to make sure that Yuki can produce the same way as Max Verstappen can? And if you've got that mindset, I think you're going to be successful, whether it be in motor racing or not. And, if you look at it, somebody said to me, Henk Latergan, who's one of our South African champions in Rally Raid, said motor racing is an engineering sport requiring a driver capable of taking that engineering excellence and winning. But first of all, it's the engineering side. If you haven't got a good car, you're not going to win. And if you haven't got a good team in your company, and whether it be, as I say, whether it be your salespeople, whether it be your technical people or stores, whatever it might be, if you don't have the whole team working together, you are going to fail. I don't care how good you are as a so-called manager or whatever title you want to give yourself, president. I personally like the thing of emperor. If you want to call me something, call me the emperor. No, I'm joking, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, without those people, you are nothing. And you must. It can't be words. It's not just words that you got to say. It's actually that's how you got to operate. You got to look and understand who you're working with. What are their requirements, and what do you need to do to keep the people who are in your team happy? And I don't say that we get it right every time, but I think I can say we do try to get it right every time.
Mm. So I want to get off the list of questions that I had prepped for you and just pivot back to that Red Bull comment about Max. I mean, do you think the team changes, the team leader changes that were made in the last 2-3 weeks is going to be positive, or do you think those guys are on a journey to nothing here?
I think the problems all started last year, where First of all, Adrian Newey left, then Wheatley left, and there were two others. So they lost 4 top people. And if you just think in going back to your company, you lose 4 top people, you got a problem. And Adrian Newey is exactly what I was talking about, those small things. You know, he walks around, you saw him recently in one of the Grand Prix with his notepad and pencil and walking up to the McLaren and looking. And, you know, he'll see the tiniest little thing on that McLaren and say, I wonder why that's there. And then go back to the factory and think, wait a moment, I do know why it's there, and let me change this. So when he left Red Bull, there were other people, obviously, who were clever and who understood some of these things, but they didn't understand why he did them. So when the combination of things didn't work, they couldn't work out how to change it because they didn't have his understanding. He knew he did that for a specific reason. The minute something else changed, maybe tire compounds changed, that little tweak wouldn't work with those tires. Adrian understood that and would change something else to compensate, whereas the people who took over don't seem to be able to do it. I mean, they cannot get that car right. In fact, it's just getting worse. What is going to be fascinating is to see what happens with Aston Martin next year. I mean, all the brand new regulations, and that's going to be Adrian Newey's first proper Aston Martin because he hasn't been involved in this car at all. And just see what his magic is. But if you look at his history throughout the manufacturers he's been with, you know, he's an absolute genius, and it's all fine detail that makes the difference.
I like that. So in a 24-hour race, I mean, you obviously have to be in total sync with your co-drivers. I mean, how do you create that level of trust and that kind of culture at Duxbury Networking with your leadership team?
Well, do I get it right every time? I'm not sure. Okay. You know, I think it's trying to be honest. And when there's a problem between whether it be people or departments and so on, you know, I ask people to talk about it. And yes, I can get involved, but I'd far rather that the two of you sat down. And yeah, I'm happy to listen and try and assist, but it's not for me to step in and dictate. You need to sit down with the people and whatever it is, sit down and have a cup of coffee or whatever it is and say, guys, I've got a problem with how you deal with me. Because, you know, people can say things and they don't understand how much it affects somebody else for whatever reason. If they don't talk about it, it festers. So I try and get people to when there's an issue, to talk about it openly as soon as possible. You know, don't involve HR, don't involve me. I'm happy to be involved with you if I need to be, but try and sort the problems out and keep that level of communication going, because once the communication stops, there's a problem. Because I just go back to something you asked what happened the last couple of weeks. You're obviously talking about Christian Horner, who left. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? I don't think that any of us outside of the inner circle understand what really happened in the last 18 months. And therefore, I can't comment whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, if you think about it, he won 6 constructors championships, 8 drivers championships over 20 years. I mean, that is super successful. But somewhere, I believe the communication between whether it be the Thai people or the Austrians or the team, something started to go wrong there. But I don't know what those things are. Nobody outside of the inner circle does. So is this a good thing or not? I don't know. The new manager's a great guy. I mean, he's certainly capable. What will happen with Horner going forward? Will he end up at Alpine? Most likely, I would say that's probably where he's going to end up going. I don't think we've seen the end of Christian Horner. And clearly, that whatever happened in the last 18 months, let's call it, was bad for him and bad for the team. But prior to that, he ran a fantastic operation. So anybody who's looking for a manager without the politics that existed or it then ended up existing at Red Bull, he'll be a great person to hire.
You're talking about the Thai shareholders, where the majority shareholder handed over to his son now, I believe.
Yeah, well, you know, it was 49-51, and then there was a story recently that 2% was sold to the son of the Austrians. But in fact, that's not true. Those 2% were sold to a completely separate Swiss company. So it still actually means that the Thai have got more shares than the Austrians, I think by 1% or something like that. But, you know, clearly they're not involved daily. But once the founder passed away, which is what, 2-3 years ago. Clearly, there's a lot of people who wanted to take leadership, and I think maybe that was what happened when he was in control. Between him and Helmut Marko, they just said how it was going to be, and that was what it was. Suddenly, you got management by committee, if I can put it that way, and I don't think
too many
management by
hands on the
committee,
steering wheel.
and all wanting to be on the steering wheel. So again, if you ask what is the concept, you can't have management by committee. You've got to have somebody who's got to have the power and the control and the understanding to make those final decisions. Yes, get advice from as many people to make certain that you understand the thing properly, but then make the call. And he would make the absolute call properly, 100%, together with Helmut Marko.
Yeah, I always joke. I mean, you used the word emperor, but it's like a benign dictatorship if you actually think about it.
Exactly. Well, that's the best form of leadership. If you look at
Yeah.
Formula One, I mean, with Bernie Ecclestone, okay, I'm not sure he was a benign dictator though. Maybe he was just a dictator, but he took Formula One from absolutely nothing to the height that it was. And then interesting, and this is the important part. He did all his deals from television. That's how he made money for Formula One, effectively. Formula One management, that is. But he never understood that today we all want to go online. And when Liberty took over and opened this up to now we can stream wherever we are in the world, whether it be on our phone, on our laptop, on our iPad, where previously if you were traveling and there was a Grand Prix, there was a huge issue. How would you watch it? Now, you buy into f1live.com or whatever it is, and I could watch it that night or any other time. And then, of course, there was Drive to Survive, which I don't think Bernie would ever have agreed to in the first place. And that brought, I think probably millions of extra viewers worldwide, and particularly obviously in the United States, where, that Formula One wasn't that great. Drive to Survive is not a program for me. It's like the new F1 movie. I don't know if you've seen it, but, apparently
on Netflix.
Yeah, apparently there's a huge number of accidents, and, it's great for Drive to Survive people, not necessarily for people who watch Formula One properly or watch motor racing who understand it. Unless you say, hey, I love a Hollywood movie, in which case you go in there with that mindset. I think that was what Carlos Sainz said. If you understand it's a Hollywood movie, you can enjoy it. If you don't want to do that, then rather don't go. So, that's it.
So, just talking about your induction into the South African Hall of Fame, I think that was 2019, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, just before COVID, yeah.
So looking back, what had been a steeper learning curve in your life? Taming a 650 horsepower plus racing machine, or navigating the insane shifts we've seen in IT in the last 40 years? I mean, you just look back, mainframe days, client server computing, World Wide Web, the cloud, smartphones, IoT, and of course AI and automation now. Is it tougher to handle a Porsche on a racetrack or running an IT company?
It's different. When the first time I drove a 956 Porsche at the 9 hour at Kyalami with suddenly the 800 horsepower and turbo, I remember in those days they didn't have small turbos, you had one giant one. And so you had no power for the first 50 meters, and then all of a sudden you had everything. The difference was you had to deal with it instantly because you're going fast and it's happening so quickly. So it's intense pressure for a short period of time. What you're talking about of all these changes from a dial-up modem to AI, it's a slower change. So you've got more time to maybe think about it and, wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, well, what do I want to do about this or what do I want to do about that? You're driving a racing car, you've got no time to think about it. It's instant. That's what it is. But again, I guess the same thing. Anybody who ever rode a 50cc motorbike, all they wanted to do was to get 100cc or 125 or 175. And when you first got on the bike, wow, it was so fast. A week later, what did you want? You wanted a 250. And if you got a 250, you wanted a 500. You get used to it. And I guess in driving the Porsche or whatever it might have been, it was exactly the same story. To begin with, it is absolutely mind-boggling. Then you get used to it. And I guess after 41 years, I'm sort of used to these changes. It's a challenge, and sometimes it's scary because if I talk about tomorrow, well, what is tomorrow going to bring? maybe AI gets rid of us. Now, I think we both know it's not going to, but you understand where I'm coming from, whatever it might be. But there's all sorts of, if you just take the present situation with tariffs, how are these tariffs potentially going to affect us? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. So, you've got to be aware of it. And I think you must be cautiously nervous. I think that keeps you on the edge. If you've got too much confidence and, it's not going to affect me, you maybe make a mistake. Be aware of it and be prepared to react if something happens that is going to affect our businesses in the IT business completely.
So really what you're talking about is keeping yourself open to adaptability. I mean, pivoting back to your racing career, can you think of a specific moment in a race, maybe where there was a massive technical issue or a downpour, where you had to adapt on the fly, or a lesson that helped you handle a major crisis in your business from your racing career? What's the most dramatic incidents looking back
in racing?
40 years? Yeah.
In racing, it was driving a jet car. I got talked into, convinced, call it what you want, to go and drive a jet car Tolton, and it's just extraordinary. And basically, you've got a steering wheel that's just a triangle, one hand on the steering wheel and one hand on the parachute. And when you do the burner pops, because all for the crowd, it's a show, the brakes are solid, but the force means with 4 tires on the tar, the car still slewed a bit sideways. So when I let go, the car was veering into the right-hand lane as opposed to going straight. And that quarter mile, let me tell you, my arm nearly fell off in fear and everything else, because now also you're not going to give up. You're not going to lift off, right? You can't do that because you're also stupid. Okay, if you know what I'm saying. And I kept going. We did the quarter mile, and then as it was with the car constantly wanting to go to the wrong side of the track. That was probably the most, how can I say, adrenaline filled events. And after that, I did it a couple more times and said, what, this is not a skill set that I enjoy. I enjoy driving around corners and doing that. Going in a straight line, even though it was incredibly fast, was not something that I aspired to. So, you've got that. And then in business, well, I guess maybe it's people that you've been working with for a long time who you really trust. You suddenly decide they want to go and live in a different country, and you've based a lot of what you're doing on working together with that person. That I think is probably the biggest single challenge I've come across. The rest of it you can deal with, but when you've spent years together with somebody who suddenly finds that they don't want to live in South Africa anymore and they're leaving, well, you can't offer them anything more because that's what they want to do, and so that changes your view, and you have to then really change your mindset and be adaptable.
So, second last question for you. I mean, from mastering ground effects on a racing car to mastering the network effect of running a channel business, if you look at emerging trends like AI and cybersecurity, etc., what racing lessons are you using to prepare Duxbury for the next 40 years or 41 years?
Well, I'm not going to be here in 41 years unless it's a miracle, but be that as it may. I think you must make certain that you're not caught by the hype. You take it in designing cars. Somebody, whoever it might be, has a certain type of a wing. You can't just copy that wing because it's not the wing alone. It's from the front of the car. Every little piece of whatever it is directing air and eventually onto the rear wing. So don't get caught by the hype of the new whatever it is. And if you take AI, there's, huge value, but there's a lot of extra hype on AI that is not relevant to us today, or not relevant maybe to my company, maybe to somebody else's company. And people get caught up with this whole thing of AI and not explaining what it actually does. And you are very involved with your company at this level. And we had a meeting the other day with him, and it's the basic, what do I need? It's not AI that I need. I need something that AI gives me. It's a different way around. Nobody's selling me AI. They're selling me something that can be done that happens to be called AI. Do you understand my analysis here?
Pain relief for business ache.
Exactly right. where it used to be done by humans or whatever. You can now do it through AI, which is more efficient and cost effective.
Graham, finally, I mean, you've had two very different careers, which seems like two sides of the same coin. If you had to boil all of it down to a single rule that applies equally to winning at Daytona and running a successful company, Duxbury, what would that be for our listeners?
My competitiveness. I love winning and I hate losing. It's really as simple as that. And that's what keeps me going now. I mean, I love the thrill of the challenge. I love the thrill of driving fast, well, being faster than somebody else. You know, I wasn't there just to make up the field. Yeah, the love of winning.
So related. Thanks very much for your time. It was an eye-opener and very insightful. Graham Duxbury, cheers.
Thanks, then. Bye-bye.
Cheers.